Welcome to the Raptors Weekly Podcast for April the 25th. We are in the middle of a playoff series against the Indiana Pacers. Series tied 2-2, which many did not see coming. A lot of experts had this series being over in 4, maybe even 5. It was a rough couple of weeks. But here we are, 2-2, series tied. The Raptors lost Game 4, 183 in Indiana, and come back to the ACC for Tuesday night showdown. And it's a must-win game for the Raptors because they do not want to go down 2-3 and head back to Indiana, trying to basically force a Game 7. And Andrew's going to tell us how we avoid that. Ain't that right, Andrew?
That's right, Zarar. We put the ball in the hoop more times than they do, essentially, is what this is going to come down to. I think if we can score more points than them in the next game, I think we'll come out with a victory. I don't want to step outside of my boundaries as a so-called expert, but I feel strongly that this is the key to winning.
Dude, you should write for Grantland.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly where I could get published right now. That's the current form of Grantland.
That's the sort of analysis that SI.com is known for these days.
Yeah, in all seriousness, though, that is essentially the kind of analysis that you often get on color commentating if you just listen to the nonsense subtext.
Yeah. But remember Sports Illustrated? That used to be like the Bible or the go-to place for sports way back when, and now it's like Sports Illustrated. That's a website, right? Or they released a swimsuit edition, something like they've fallen to that level of credibility.
People they don't care. Like there's too much available on the internet instead of nothing being available on the internet. I remember being a kid and knowing who was on the cover of SI and feeling like that mattered. Can you tell me the last time you remember what was on the cover of SI?
No. I think the last time I cared about who was on the cover of SIs was like in like the late 90s or mid 90s when the Bulls and Phil Jackson were on the cover. They were going for 72 wins and like they had like a nice little cover called like Bull Run or something like that. And it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But yeah, it doesn't seem to matter because there's so many outlets out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, SI has some great writers still. I still read some of the guys that are at SI, but even their online stuff seems really sort of split between multiple websites, and it's MMQB and SI.com and the fan-sided, and I don't really know what's going on over there. Yeah. I just go with what you send me.
Yeah. All right, so we should probably talk about some Raptors. 2-2 is what the series stands right now. They lost Game 4. And they got blown out in Game 4. Game 2, 3, and 4 were essentially not close at all. And how much were you surprised by the fact that the Raptors, after a strong Game 3 performance, just got steamrolled in Game 4?
Yeah, I was surprised at how much they got steamrolled just because it seemed like they stopped. I think Andy Greer was talking about it in the halftime interview, how much they've just stopped doing the things that were working for them in Games 2 and 3. And I don't know if that was an adjustment that Indiana made or if they just kind of got away from it and really seemed to struggle to get back into doing anything coherent. Like they were beat. Like it kept seeming like they were trying to make a comeback and they never really got that ship started whatsoever. Like were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised by how easily Indiana was able to jump on us. I know it sounds kind of like plain analysis and a bit reductive, but it seems like the team that comes out more aggressive or wants to like play ball on that day tends to get to a big lead and will hang on to it. In Game 3, it was the Raptors who just appeared more ready. Indiana was maybe a little too, a little too lax given their home court and so on, and the Raptors jumped on them and they kind of killed the game early. Same thing happened in Game 4 where Indiana were the more aggressive team. It is what it is. I mean, the team that comes out flat usually gets rolled.
Yeah, I mean, I think that effort is a big part of it, but focus seemed to be the defining factor from what I could see. That, in Game 4, at least, Toronto was really trying to match Indiana's energy and their effort, and it was kind of resulting in turnovers. It was resulting in guys forcing plays, guys dribbling the ball off their feet, not making smart passes, committing to something like a jump pass before they saw who was there, and just turning the ball over. And I think with 9 or 10 first-half turnovers that the Raptors had in Game 4, and that seemed to be just not mentally present or just not focusing it right, and trying to counteract that with energy kind of led to a lot more miscues than it did help. It seemed like to me.
Yeah, and Indiana's strength all season, if they have one, is that they convert turnovers very well. I think they led the league in points off turnovers this season, and the Raptors committed 17 in Game 4. DeRozan had 6 of them. And how quickly they sparked the fast break based on turnovers is pretty impressive because Monta Ellis no matter how old he is, does still have speed on the break and he knows how to use it. The same with Paul George, obviously, and even George Hill is a pretty good player on the break. And when you give them 17 turnovers, especially ones that are kind of like a point to wing pass that goes astray, like basically active turnovers, not like a dead ball turnover, they run it back really fast. And I think that seemed to spark them. And once they got to that big first quarter lead, that you could see the belief come in. They got some big performances, career performances from guys like Mahinmi, who's been absent in the series. He was 9 for 14. George Hill was 9 for 11. Both had 22 points. So this is, and combine this with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry's struggles, it was a bit of a perfect storm for the Pacers where their role players just exploded and the Raptors' star players just didn't do anything.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think in the first few games, the Raptors are a little bit more content to sort of, if the Pacers want to run something through Mahinmi, if like some of those hook shots that Mahinmi was throwing up in games 1 and 2 were just atrocious. So I don't expect another 22-point performance from him, especially if Valanciunas is playing larger and larger minutes and not in foul trouble. But the George Hill thing, I mean, George Hill is getting a lot of uncomfortably open shots in this series. And like George Hill, I mean, Mahinmi is not ever going to be an offensive powerhouse, and that's not George Hill's role either. But if you're leaving George Hill open, he can hit shots. He's not a bad shooter. So I'm a little frustrated and concerned about how open it is he's been, whether that's because he's the one people are rotating off of, or in game 4, at least, it seemed like there were just a lot of breakdowns and a lot of offensive sets that came out of turnovers where the Raptors' transition defense never really got set in place.
Yeah. And what scared me here...
I think George Hill is more of a concern if that's how we're going to be guarding him, or if that's where the ball ends up finding the open hand.
Yeah. Like this is the first time he took more than 7 shots in a game in this series. And he hasn't been playing bad offensively necessarily. Like he's been 3 for 6, 2 for 5, 3 for 7, and obviously 9 for 11 in game 4. George Hill's problems here have been on the defensive side, where he really can't guard Corey Joseph off the dribble, and Kyle Lowry seems to get by him a lot. He's had a bad series defensively, but offensively, I think he's been okay. He's been missing some threes that he normally makes, but like you hate to see this guy find his groove heading into Game 5 in Toronto, because as you said, like he's been pretty much dormant in terms of offense in the series, but he's liable to explode, and that's the danger here. But Game 5, Andrew, are we genuinely actually worried about the series?
About the series? I think speaking for myself and most of the people I've talked to, we've run the full emotional gamut of overreactions over the last 10 days. I think that we're talking about a game played by human beings, and the margin isn't maybe as big as we thought it was. So I think you're silly not to have concern. As far as genuine worry is in like thinking that this is a 50-50 series, or that we're statistically less likely to win, I don't think is the case. I still am confident in the Raptors' ability to win this series, probably in 6 games. But I mean, I think it's been demonstrated already that it's not so much the fact that the Pacers are better than we thought they were. It's that the team is really struggling to execute on the level that they were, and the Pacers are good enough to take advantage of that and have enough veteran presence and have enough coaching to really seize the opportunity if the Raptors leave the door open.
Are you surprised by let's tackle our star players one by one. Are you surprised at all by DeRozan's struggles in this series?
I'm surprised that he had the same struggles in game 4 that he had in game 2 when he got pulled. Like it seemed like it felt like the Raptors really learned something in game 2, as far as that the answer was not to try the same failed example over and over and over again, and just to trust the ball into DeRozan's hands, whether he's creating a shot or just give him carte blanche to try to make something happen. I thought that they learned that, and then it has become evident that they did not actually learn that. So that's what's surprising to me, is that they're continuing to try the same thing and expecting a different result when we have 4 games. Because even in the wins, DeMar is shooting 30%, so 30-something percent. That is very surprising. I don't know what we're getting at. Like, what are you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing that he tends to have whatever success he does have, he has it when the Raptors manage to switch Paul George off of him. So if he's being guarded by Solomon Hill or Monta Ellis, he's more liable to get a positive outcome on his offense. But if it's George Hill, if it's Paul George, he's essentially a write-off on offense because he's just being covered really well. and he doesn't pass it off in those cases. He tends to actually take a very tough shot. Today I did a compilation of his game 4 shots and turnovers, and I looked at it, and you were like, I'd say 80% of those shots you could easily classify as low percentage / forced shots. And
Sure.
when you looked at the press conference after game 3, or after game 4, him and Lowry said, well, these are the shots that went in during the regular season, and we're going to continue taking them. And I was like, okay, that's fine, because in the regular season, on average, you're not going up against a defender of Paul George's caliber. Here you are, so you got to do something a little different. So if they use the same attitude going into game 5, I expect the same results.
Sure. I mean, I think that might be true for Lowry, that he's taking a lot of the same shots that he did in the season, and he's not hitting them. But I don't think that is true for DeMar. Like, I think that he's taking shots from similar areas on the floor, but he's leaning much heavier away than he would normally do, or he's shooting it over 2 guys instead of 1 guy, or he's, like going into a set defense instead of having already broken that down before he's getting closer to the rim. The shots he's taking are really bad looks, not just because it's a low percentage shot, but because he's so well defended, especially when he's playing with the starting unit, when he's got Paul George on him most of the time. And if not, I mean, the way they're just sort of slacking off of Scola and packing the paint, he can't get anywhere within 15 feet without having 2 guys in front of him and trapping him if he's either shooting it or trying to make a pass out of a trap, or he's already left his feet, and it's turnover. Like, they need to maximize the time that he's playing with the maximum amount of spacing, which means absolutely no Scola. Or there are times when Paul George is on the bench and you see DeRozan on the bench too. Like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
If you're committed to making DeRozan, if you think that the only way you win is by him making offense happen, then you need to adjust your approach, because it's clearly not working. And DeMar's mental approach seems to be that he thinks he's just shooting poorly, and he's got to shoot his way through the slump. And the slump isn't because he's missing makeable shots; it's because Indiana is making him take really difficult shots.
Yeah, it's a very good point. When Paul George is sitting, maybe DeRozan should be the one playing, and maybe that's the way you maximize time away from Paul George for DeRozan. So he's been taking a lot of heat. People are wondering how much money has he lost on his upcoming contract by having another poor playoff run? And I'm like, I don't think he's lost a single cent, because he's going to get what he's going to get regardless of what happens here.
I mean, that's a marketplace question more than a basketball question, though. The question exists in a universe wherein you are only allowed to pay a player a certain amount, and so many teams have a full amount with which to spend, which they are incentivized to spend. So if this was an uncapped sport, sure, I think he's lost money. But no, he's going to get a max deal from someone.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I think that question needs to be put to rest. And it's a stupid question, because it doesn't really affect the series at all. But hey, Kyle Lowry is basically not getting much heat at all, and it's been focused entirely on DeRozan's play against Paul George. But Blake posted an article today, and I think he linked Ben Golliver's tweet, and he looked at historically bad playoff shooting performances. And right now, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan are in the top 12 of all-time terrible shooting during the playoffs. Kyle Lowry is 5th. Between 2009 and 2016, he's been shooting 35% in the playoffs. But he seems to be getting a pass in this playoff series, because the narrative is that he's been contributing a lot more in other areas of the court, like passing, defense, penetration. What do you make of that? Kyle Lowry, is he less guilty in this?
I think so. I think that Kyle, sort of across the board, has played better. I think that the shots that he's choosing to take aren't shots that hurt the offense. He's missing shots that I do think he normally takes, or if he's taking a bad shot, it's usually at the end of a shot clock or something like that. He's getting assists. He's playing adequate defense, or good defense at times even. Whereas, I mean, it's not just that DeMar's not hitting shots. It's that if you look at the shots Kyle's taking, I don't think that they seem as out of place or as ill-timed decisions as the one that DeMar's is taking. On top of that, like DeMar's getting lit up. I saw it today. I'm trying to think of where I saw this, but whoever DeMar is guarding is shooting over 60% in the series right now. It's not just one side of the court. It's both ends of the court. DeMar is not playing well. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm saying this is a very bad series for him. All evidence points towards.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've noticed too is that that whenever you see Monta Ellis, guarding or going up against DeMar DeRozan, he always makes a point to actually take it. I think it's a concerted effort from their coach that DeRozan is a weak link in their starting five in terms of defense, and they go at him quite hard. I agree with you. I think Kyle Lowry is still doing a lot of other things that kind of absolve him, and even his 4 for 12 in Game 4 wasn't that big of a deal. I don't think it was the reason we lost. I think there were other things going on with the first quarter start and whatnot that killed us. But Luis Scola, man, I think we kind of touched on him earlier. A lot of people want him out of the starting lineup, and with good reason. You mentioned the fact that DeMar DeRozan needs as much floor spacing around him as possible, and Luis Scola is not going to provide that. Do we go ahead and make a change in the starting lineup? The whole reason Scola is in the lineup is because you want some rhythm for Patterson coming off the bench. And one theory that's being put out there is that if you're going to bench Scola, you got to get Jason Thompson or somebody into the starting lineup so that Patterson maintains his bench role.
Sure, or I mean, or put. I mean, I guess it depends on. I think one reason that Indiana might have moved to starting Miles Turner is to discourage the Raptors from trying to go small and trying to demand that you have someone large out there to guard Turner. But maybe try going small, throw DeMar down to the 4 and put Powell in the starting lineup or something like that. But like Scola, I mean, he's missing everything from 3, but like the Pacers are just sagging off of him so consistently to just pack the paint and make any attempt to get to the rim impossible. And like Scola is a much improved 3-point shooter, and he hit a lot of shots this year. But the problem is, those were a lot of open shots this season, and he has a very slow release. So he's not taking that shot nearly as often when he does get it, just because a player is able to get back out there and challenge. They're making an effort to challenge every shot, and they're making more of an effort than they would in the regular season. So he's not nearly as open on those looks, and he's instead actually putting the ball on the floor usually when someone tries to collapse out against him. And what that's doing is just killing any kind of attempt for spacing, and he's not able to guard Turner defensively now. He hasn't been able to really contribute, and the starting lineup is just getting blown out of the water because, or not all the time, but is often getting blown out of the water when they're trying to have the ball run through DeMar or Kyle because there's just no space for those guys to operate.
Yeah, and I'm of the belief that I think our ideal lineup right now is Lowry, Joseph in the backcourt, Carroll, and Powell, basically playing 3 and 4, so Powell at the 3 and Carroll at the 4, and then you can pick any one of Patterson, JV, and Biyombo to round that out. I think that's going to be your best defensive lineup and offensive lineup so far because it's a lot of ball handling, a lot of shooting. Carroll's playing well. You got to maximize those that bunch out there. If that means benching DeMar DeRozan, you can't be scared to do it. I think him playing 33 minutes in Game 4 was a sign that Dwayne Casey is still reluctant to bench him, kind of like how he did in Game 2. So that's what I would kind of aim for here.
And Patterson is still only playing 26 minutes a game. Like what? Why is Patterson? Like Patterson is the 3rd or 4th best guy on this team. Why is he not playing 35 minutes a game? Like it's the playoffs. Like I'm positive that he is in adequate physical shape to play those minutes because every minute that he's on the floor, he's contributing so much more than we're getting at that position whenever he's off of it.
It's like Indiana's front line. Like we're so much better than Indiana's front line that we can afford to put whoever on our front line out there and we'll be fine. Like we actually don't have to worry about getting out-muscled, out-rebounded, outshot. We can dictate that matchup entirely, and there's a easy argument to be made why Patterson should be playing 35 minutes a game in this series because there's nothing the Pacers can counter to it. Do you see any frontline matchup where the Pacers have an advantage where if we deploy Patterson or Biyombo or JV for extended minutes, they can hurt us?
No, like as long as any of those guys, like they can't push around. Like Valanciunas is dummying guys while getting fouled constantly, single-handedly getting offensive rebounds or at least fighting for them over 2 guys. Biyombo has been able to do similar things whenever he's been out there. Patterson has been fantastic, even in the losses for the most part. I mean, he was a bad minus in Game 4, but that also is true of everyone. But that's not how they're beating us. And when we beat them, it was when we kind of requested them to make offense happen through those guys.
Yeah, I fully agree, man. I think Powell needs more minutes. I think Patterson needs more minutes. I think they both can come at the expense of DeRozan if he's struggling. And somebody said James Johnson. I said James Johnson looks like he's fat. Like, it looks like he's gained some weight sitting on that bench.
I'm not sure how much he's been practicing. Like he's missed a lot of games when he was on the bench as well, and I think he's been hurt, banged up for a long period of time. And we talked about on last podcast or 2 podcasts ago just how he hasn't seemed that engaged, and I think we kind of drew the conclusion that it seemed like maybe injuries were playing a bit of a role there. He's not the answer.
Yeah. All right, Andrew, we got to take a quick break. We weren't going to take Twitter questions, but we have a ton, so we gotta address the masses and do the justice here. So let's take a quick break and come back with Twitter questions.
Here's the scenario. Your insurance company is denying your long-term disability claim despite the fact that you've paid premiums for years and your own doctor insists that you're not well enough to work. If this sounds familiar, call Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. You'll speak with me, Brian Goldfinger, a licensed and experienced lawyer who practices exclusively on behalf of accident victims, disability claimants, and their families. Visit goldfingerlaw.com and get us working for you.
All right, welcome back to Raptors Weekly Podcast, where we make a populist turn and take questions from Twitter. First up on Twitter is our boy Will Liu, who wants to know, Zarar, what would it take for Casey to bench DeRozan?
Well, he's done it before already, Game 2, so we have some precedent for this. It would require whoever's replacing DeRozan to have good offensive and defensive games, and DeRozan to continue shooting badly and have poor defensive games. So did that make any sense? Basically, DeRozan has to be complete shit, and the guy who's playing instead of him has to be close to awesome for Casey to bench DeRozan. It has happened in Game 2. I think in Game 5 he might opt for that faster than he did in Game 4.
Yeah, I think Powell played well in Game 4. One of the few people who actually did play reasonably well, but Joseph was not fantastic in Game 4, whereas Joseph was fantastic in Game 2. And that's when we saw him go to those guys instead and trust them. And I think with having seen one thing that worked and 2 things that didn't, I think, yeah, if that situation plays out again, and even if it's not, I think he might not leave him bench for the whole 4th quarter, but if he goes to a lineup to start the 4th or when he pulls DeMar out and it's working, I think you might see him just ride it out as long as he can again. So it might be the case of, DeRozan might get a little bit of a longer break, and then they just see how that goes, and we might not notice whether or not, he maybe would have benched him, but what he's trying next isn't working either, so he goes back to him. But they lose Game 5, and Casey has to realize just how big of a deal this is, where his job is realistically on the line at that point. So, I think that's what it takes. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect, just because we've already seen it. All right. Jordan Papazuglo. Sorry, I mispronounced your last name, Jordan. We're going to get over it. Wants to know Jason Thompson. He's got to start Game 5, right?
Scola is unplayable. He's not giving you anything on either end. And this idea that he starts only because Patterson can maintain his rhythm can be accommodated by Jason Thompson starting. I think we kind of discussed this.
I don't think he will. I've been surprised before with thinking that Casey just digs in and won't make changes, but I don't think that. Sorry, if we do see a change, I don't think it's Jason Thompson in the starting 5. I'm not sure if that really solves our. And I don't think that's the answer, to be honest with you, either, because I don't think that solves the spacing issues. If what you need to do is to get DeMar and Lowry going and open up driving lanes, it's got to be Patterson or it's got to be small ball. That's the only way you actually spread the floor. Thompson is not going to do that for you. Thompson is a more athletic but less veteran savvy Scola. I don't know how Thompson really moves the needle in a way that I think either Patterson or bringing in a third guard would actually do, but leaving Carroll out there does.
Yeah, I kind of see where you're coming from. If you want to get more shooting out there, you got to go with Norman Powell and DeMar Carroll in the starting lineup and go that route. But Dwayne Casey hasn't done that so far. He seems content on essentially maintaining Patterson's rhythm and going with a bigger guy at the 4. I think Scola, he doesn't give you as much shooting, and Thompson doesn't give you shooting either. But I think Scola is also getting blown up just in one-on-one situations, and he's been getting beat to the ball a lot. In transition, he's non-existent. So I think at least Jason Thompson gives you something on the defensive end. Either way, Scola, I don't think will start Game 5.
Yeah, I hope you're right. He's been helpful during the season, but there's not a place for him in this series. I think that's really evident.
Yeah.
All right, next, Waleed at Waleed A34 asks, or rather declares, I had Raptors 6. I still got him in 6. How about you guys? Zarar, call the series.
I had him in 7 to start the series, and I'm still going to go with 7. In fact, so far it's been going exactly as planned in my head. We split a game in Toronto, split a game in Indiana, and then home.
Yeah, I had him in 4, so I guess this is all my fault. I guess Raptors in 6. Like, the game 4 was kind of a surprise for me. Like, I think, I just don't think that's representative of what the team is and who the team is. It just seemed like they were just not mentally present. And once they tried to make adjustments for that, it was just all panic ball and bad decisions. And there's no games scheduled to start before 7 p.m. for the rest of this series. So I'm gonna.
Do you honestly think this Raptor team that has gotten, like they've lost at home, they've gotten blown out once, they have what it takes to close out a tough series on the road?
I find it so difficult to draw broad, sweeping, deep conclusions like that from what we've seen so far. Like, it just seems like an intellectually reaching. I don't know how to say this probably. It just seems like you're reaching for straws from a small sample size. Yeah, I just don't think it's coming down to an issue of character. I think it's just execution, and I think when they execute, they're clearly the better team. And when they fail to execute, you find out that in the NBA, the difference between 7 and 2 isn't nearly as big as you think it is if you don't have an all-world dominant superstar. And even then, Dallas beat Oklahoma City the other night. So
I just don't think Indiana will go down easy. I think Indiana's confident. They know they can win this series. I think before the series maybe they didn't have the belief, but taking 2 games, I think they have basketball's a game of confidence in the end, man. I think they have it now. I don't think they're gonna lose in Game 6 at home. I just don't see it happening. The Raptors will win Game 5. I think the crowd's gonna be loud. It's gonna be fun, and they might even blow them out. But Game 6 closing out in Indiana, I don't historically I just don't see that happening.
Okay. Yeah. Generous Direction at Trying to Live asks, how do the Raptors handle the Turner matchup? Do you think is the Miles Turner, like, is that really a deciding point in this series? Do you feel like he is? Sorry, do you think Turner's a problem even?
No, I think Turner will get his. He's a good player. I mean, obviously he's he's surpassed all expectations coming into the season. But I don't think he's a make or break for Indiana. I think the make or break for the series lies in the Raptor hands. Is how well our 2 star player plays. Like, if DeRozan has a shoots 50% and scores 24 points on efficient shooting, it doesn't really matter what Miles Turner is doing. So I think it's more like, if you take care of our business, we'll be fine. And regardless of like who starts at the 5 for Indiana.
Yeah, like Turner has hit some shots, and I think what you see when you look at Turner and you see him contributing, you're projecting a lot of what you see in the future from Turner instead of what he's actually bringing to the series. Like, it seems to me that Valanciunas has been eaten twice with Miles Turner's lunch money a lot in this series. It's not really a concern as far as I'm concerned.
No, I don't think so.
All right. At the Ben Fox, presumably Ben Fox, asks, who will be the Raptors' leading scorer in Game 5? Or presumably he means Game 5. And so who do you think who leads the way?
Such a random question to ask, man. Lowry. I'd say Lowry. I think he finally finds a shot, and he rests the rumors that he might still be injured.
So let's put this question a different way then. Let's say, if the Raptors win Game 5, will it be because this person was their leading scorer? Person X?
No, not necessarily. I think the Raptors have shown that they're not necessarily 100% dependent on somebody dropping 30 points. I think if the question is like who's going to be the leading scorer, I think Kyle Lowry is due for a good solid Kyle Lowry type game. I think DeMar DeRozan's due as well. I just think Kyle Lowry is more likely to have one just because he's not being guarded by an all-world defender.
I think you're also onto something when you say that, like, look, if they're going to win, I don't think it's because one guy really steps up. Like, I think in the games that they've played really well, it's because they've executed their offense really, really well. They've kept motion and action after action going in the initial 15 seconds of the offense, and it's led to really good shots for several guys instead of just trying to force it, trying to make sure that DeRozan can get going. Like, if we're going to spend another game trying to make sure DeRozan can get going, then we're going to be in a tight or losing game again, more than likely. If they play the game that they should be playing, then Valanciunas, Joseph, Carroll, Lowry, even DeMar could be the leading scorer. I don't think that's going to be a deciding factor.
I think that's a good point, because we can't spend time getting a guy going. Like if that's what we're trying to do with DeMar DeRozan, and as you said, that results in 4 for 12 and 4 for 19 games. And if something is not working, you got to move fast, because you can't wait for a guy to find a shot, especially with DeMar DeRozan, as I mentioned, for the 10th time. He's going up against Paul George.
All right. Billy at Cash103 wants to know, if Raptors lose the series, is DeMar coming back?
I don't care. I really don't care. As long as Casey doesn't come back, I'll be okay. Would you really be heartbroken if DeMar DeRozan walks? Like, for the record, I want him to sign because he loves the city and he's a good player. But I can't really think of that question right now, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's to be like, we've got about 9 different iterations of that question, essentially. So that's why I chose one of them. But yeah, like the DeRozan thing, I think we all kind of came to terms even before he ended up having quite as good of a season as he did, with the idea that, as a franchise, you're much better off, especially on the cap, bringing back any kind of a really positive asset you have. And DeMar has been a really good character guy, and he's been a really good regular season player. So I'm not upset. If we lose this series, I'm not, really mad and thinking we'll never be, a contending team because we've given this money to DeMar. And if he walks, you can find a solace in that. But that's not really where I'm not ready to concede the idea that we're losing this series and it's because of DeMar at this point yet.
Now, let me ask you a question. And all you got to do is just answer with the name and don't give any explanation. Who was better in their career with the Raptors so far? Chris Bosh or DeMar DeRozan?
Chris Bosh.
All right. Okay, move on.
Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, if we survived Chris Bosh, we'll survive DeMar DeRozan.
Sure. Yeah, fair. True. All right. That's the end of the largely coherent questions on Twitter.
Hey,
so.
I like one here at the end.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
I like one from @CornerTray Karimo. He goes, choose one. DeMar DeRozan at the max for the next 5 years, or Norm at $1 million per year for the next 3.
Ooh.
I guess the question here is, what's the ceiling for Norman Powell? What do we think is the ceiling for the guy?
So look, I love the idea of having Norm around and seeing where he's going to go. The one thing I think that we all need to be prepared for as Norm he's going to play a much bigger role in the team next year regardless, but one thing to consider is the fact that he played so little minutes this year and no one really knew who he was, that we talked about this a little while ago, how wide open many of the shots that he gets are because people have been sagging off of him, and that no one really knows how to scout him that well, and there's not really a feel for how to guard him. And I think that he's going to continue to grow and get better, but I do think there is going to be a little bit of a check there, and the NBA is going to adjust and recognize Norm Powell too.
Answer the question, Andrew.
Yeah, it depends. I don't know how to, in a vacuum, I guess I think DeRozan is a better player to have. But as soon as you start taking into context, well, who else could we get as well as Norm once you take that into account from the money? I think that really changes it a lot. If you can get someone else, like if you can bring in Nicholas Batum and have Norman, or you can only have DeRozan and Norm, like that's a much different question. So
did you answer yet?
I cheated. I said if you can bring someone else, if choosing Norm means you can bring someone else good in, then Norm.
Okay, then it's obviously Norm.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfair because we're asking this question at the absolute worst point of DeRozan's playoff career with the Raptors. So I mean, I think you're right. I never looked at it that way. Like if you're only paying Norm $1 million over the next 3 years, then your cap room is basically wide open. You can throw money anywhere you want. So if you look at it that way, yeah, I'd go with Norm.
But it's also possible that, just because you let DeRozan go doesn't mean you're able to bring in anyone else. Like you might not have anyone of similar value saying yes, sure, or coming in. Like you might be bringing in. I'm trying to think of who. Like that might mean you get Gerald Henderson.
Yeah. Hey man, let's wrap up part 2 and come back and wrap up the podcast after this. Welcome back to the final part of Raptors Weekly. Andrew's here. Andrew, it's Game 5 prediction time. Some things to know before you make your prediction. We are 2-0 with Jack Armstrong calling the game, and 0-2 with Leo Rautins calling the game.
Interesting. It's a TSN Sports Center thing. Sportsnet thing, rather.
So I'll tell you that the next game is on. Actually, I don't know. I don't know when the next game is. I can't look it up. So Game 5. Game 5.
Okay.
Why don't you tell me some Game 5 predictions while I figure out who's what channel the game's on?
Yeah, I think we see a Raptors team that is going back to executing a coherent offense. I think that you see some adjustments to the lineup. I think Patterson plays over 30 minutes. I think Carroll's minutes continue to go up. And I think DeMar's shots, like either DeMar has a very good game or DeMar shoots under 15 times. Like I just don't see the Raptors continuing to go to him again if he's shooting under 40%. So I think the Raptors win because doing those two things results in a home win. And I don't think it's a blowout, but I don't think it's a game that you're ever really sweating out either. I think the Raptors should be able to take this.
Yeah, it's Leo Rautins calling this game, so that doesn't bode well.
So head out the window then, yeah.
I'm gonna go with the Raptors just because it's at home. I think they are the better team. They're gonna jump on the Pacers. I think the Pacers. I think the Pacers will actually play better in this game because there's a lot of learnings from the first 4 games that they can take into account. I think some of their Mahinmi and Hill are playing better, so I think they might continue their form. I think they might jump on the Pacers early and carry a lead. I do worry if this is like a 92-92 game in the fourth quarter with like 4 minutes left. I don't think we should enter that situation. I think we should definitely try to enter the fourth quarter with a bit of a lead, because if it's tight in the fourth, the Raptors, if there's one thing that they've shown, is that when it's tight in the fourth, they tend to get a little nervous and can't really fully execute in the postseason. So hopefully they build a lead in the first 3 quarters. But overall, I'm going to say Raptors. And I think Kyle Lowry is, as I said earlier, is due for a big game. So I'm going to pick him as the man of the match. I think DeRozan, I can't, like in a pre-podcast, we talked about like what's the way out for DeRozan in this series to have a good game. And I think as long as Paul George is guarding him, it's, the chance of him having a good game is really like 30%. Which is what he's shooting. So I'd say I'll count on Kyle Lowry more than DeMar DeRozan, and I think it's at home, so the Raptors should pull this one off.
Agreed. And I think as Raptors fans, we don't know what it's like to have nice things. So if it's anywhere close to a close game, we're going to be extremely nervous because that's all we know and all we've been given reason to know. So please don't let it be close, because I've held on to hair until 30, and it's like I'm just holding on right now to that receding hairline, and this is not helping.
Here's a hypothetical, Andrew. If the Raptors lose Game 5, is this series over?
No. Do you think so? Do you think that if this game goes down, you think the Raptors are incapable of winning Game 6, or do you think they're capable?
They're capable. But at that point, I shift the odds of this series going Indiana's way to like 75-25.
Wow.
If not 80-20.
All right.
Yeah. These guys get nervous, man. They get a little nervous.
They're pretty dead.
And they don't have that. The first playoff win for a group of guys is always going to be the hardest, and they haven't had that yet. Expecting that to happen like on the road, it's just, I don't know. It's just the odds are too high. So to me, Game 5 is must win. Otherwise, it could be bad news.
Yeah, if only for my hairline.
Yeah. All right, so I think that wraps it up on a pretty sour note, I think.
Yeah, way to bum me out, man.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But the Raptors Tuesday night at home. Go see the game. Check it out. A lot of Raptor fans made the trip down to Indiana for the first 2 games. I know some of them. One point of controversy in Game 4 was that a lot of We the North signs were being thrown in the garbage by the Indiana, the ticketing people, because they strictly enforced the no signs can be bigger than 8.5 by 11.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
That was the loophole?
Yeah, except that they never enforced it, but this time they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, like, did we have that coming for the Game 1 game ops? Take an awkward
I don't know.
on Indiana.
Yeah.
Is that what that was?
I don't know. It's a nice revenge mission. I think that's how you piss off fans.
Good for those guys for driving down there, though. I was really impressed at how many fans made it.
Yeah, and they were audible too. I mean, you could all hear them. And
yeah, sure.
All right, so make us proud, Raptor fans. This time at home on Tuesday night in Game 5. Until then, rate us on iTunes, rate us on Stitcher. If you want to support Raptors Republic, go to patreon.com/Raptors Republic. Other than that, we'll see you after Game 5, hopefully when the Raptors assume a 3-2 series lead. Until then, thanks, Andrew.
Go Drakes.
Goodbye.